Welcome to today's consumer educational virtual event. My name is Maheen Qureshi, and I am a housing outreach manager with Freddie Mac. And I'm really excited to welcome you to this event that's being hosted by Easterseals, a great national nonprofit partner of Freddie Mac. Just want to tell you quickly about Freddie Mac. So, we are a government sponsored enterprise. We were established in 1970 by the US Congress with a mission to establish or provide liquidity, stability, and affordability to the US housing market. Now, what does that mean for you, for all of us as consumers? Essentially, if we are a home buyer or homeowner, our mortgage may actually be funded by Freddie Mac. And if we live in an apartment building, our apartment may actually be financed by Freddie Mac. So Freddie Mac does own and fund and finance mortgages. And actually, our competitor and the other government sponsored enterprise, Fannie Mae, is a similar type of entity, and they also support the US housing market in that sense. So today, we're here because we really believe in the power of financial education. And we've got a couple of great speakers who are really knowledgeable and are going to share some resources during this pandemic around financial resilience, protecting your credit and taking care of and strengthening your finances, and what to do if you're struggling with your rent payment or mortgage, you're concerned about your mortgage payment, or on the positive side of opportunity if you're an aspiring home buyer. So let me just quickly say that we are going to take your questions. We want you to type your questions in, so please use YouTube chat for that. And so I'm going to pause along the way as we speak to our panelists today and take some of your questions. And we're going to save time at the end of the event for more questions from you. So those are some of the virtual logistics for today. And then let me go ahead and introduce our speakers today. So we've got Katie Thorstenberg. Katie is a housing counselor extraordinaire. She works with Easterseals of Greater Houston, and she's very committed to helping home buyers, homeowners, and renters, and she is a HUD certified housing counselor. So Katie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Maheen. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And then our second speaker is my colleague, Holly Olson. Holly is a mortgage servicing policy senior at Freddie Mac, and she's really knowledgeable about what homeowners can do about their mortgage options, especially at times of crisis like these. So Holly, thank you for being here today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Great. So now that we've introduced everybody, I want to jump right in because we've got a lot of questions for you, Katie and Holly. Let's start with Katie. So Katie, can you share a couple of stories and tell us about what trends are you seeing during the pandemic? What's going on in your community? And I realize that this is a national audience, but a lot of things that we're seeing on the ground in different communities may actually be applicable in different parts of the country. So I'd like to hear about the trends. What are the challenges that you're seeing these days in working with your clients, the consumers that you do housing counseling with?
Well, happy to. But first, I'd like to give you an idea of some of the families that I've worked with, because we talk so much about the pandemic nowadays and all the challenges and all of the problems that exist. I'd like to give you an idea of what's happening in my little world. I counsel clients from about a 9-county radius. They're all low income, just to give you an idea of kind of an average gross annual income of about $44,000. So all first-time low-income families and looking to purchase their first home. So they come to me, not very much education on how the process and mortgage options and things like that, and very interested in down payment assistance. A lot of challenges in today's world, as we know. But first, I'd like to give you an idea of just since January 1, about some of the families that we've closed. We've closed about 26 families have been able to close on their first home since January the 1st, and 19 of those since March 1st. And that's when really the pandemic hit big time in our area. And I'll give you just a little idea of these families. We had a disabled vet and his wife caring for 2 children They were living on a pension and the wife's part-time income. And they were able to move from an apartment rent of $1,200 a month to $900 a month and purchase their first-time home and with the down payment assistance. We had just recently a single mom with 4 children. She moved down here from the north. She took on extra work and she was living in a 2-bedroom apartment, driving an hour and a half to work with down payment assistance. She was able to get a single family home. There again, mortgage payment about $100 less than what she was renting in. About 2 months ago, a single 74-year-old lady on fixed income, obviously, was able to get a home. She purchased a condo and her mortgage rent, I can't believe this, with down payment and other great mortgage options, was under $600 a month. That was less than half of what she was paying in apartment rent. We had recently also another single lady, really neat lady. She was, her work was driving a school bus for disabled children, loves the children with disabilities. That obviously stopped when the pandemic hit, but she found a similar job caring for disabled children in a facility. And we were able to help her close on her home. There again, mortgage payment less than her rent. And this is an ongoing trend that I want to point out for all those people who are scared or maybe a little bit timid of moving from rent to mortgage payment. If you do it, if you work on all the things that you need to work on, and that's your budget, cleaning up your credit, reducing your debt, making sure your income is pretty stable. Use all of the best mortgage options out there, and there's so many great mortgage products and great down payment programs. You can generally get into a mortgage payment which is less than your apartment rent, and that's a fixed payment for 30 years. Isn't that great? That feeling of stability of having a roof over your head. So all that being said, that's the great part, and I love to see that. But the biggest, since the pandemic, the single problem that I see is debt. And you can imagine why. These people are facing a lot of times reduced hours. They're being furloughed. They're being laid off. All kinds of situations. And when that happens, they start piling on debt. And just to give you an example, I had a single man who came to me about 2 months ago, and he had made an application about 6 months ago and was in good shape to get into a home. But he had been furloughed, and so for a number of months, and his income had been reduced. His income went up to 27% of his monthly income. And just to give you a reference point, debt to income ratio should be under about 15%. His was 27%. In other words, out of about 3,600 of monthly income, he was paying $1,000 in fixed debt already. And so we really struggled. We got down into his budget to see what we could do. And that gentleman closed about a month ago. The one where they're putting on their debt, which I guess this is logical, is credit cards. I've seen before the pandemic, I saw more of consumer loans and those types of debt. But since the pandemic, I've seen more credit card balances to go up. And as you know, that can really hurt your credit because the higher debt ratios on your credit card, the worse your credit. And then it builds up. But I wanted to give you a good example. We closed just yesterday on a single mom with 2 children. She had a steady job, had been working for 10 years at the same job, but her ex-husband had been laid off. And so she lost that child support, which was a big percentage of her income. So that happened about 5 months ago. So there again, we had to sit down, really look into the budget to see where we could come up with savings. She was able to do the work, and we closed on her home yesterday. I have another couple who will be closing Friday, and this is a young single couple. This couple is 20 years old. I can't believe it. I go from 75-year-old ladies to 20-year-olds, and they're just starting out in life, and they're so excited. This is their first home. It's a starter home. It's barely 1,000 square feet, but they're just ecstatic. They're going to be closing tomorrow. No, Friday. And they work down, they have very limited income, and they have worked so hard. They had 2 auto loans, and they paid off one, and they reduced their debt in half. So they were able to close. But that credit card balance is disturbing, and that's something that creeps up on you. And unfortunately, day by day, as you use that card, you don't really know what you're doing and how much debt you have. And I think that is going to be the major single issue of getting these families into home, is reducing that overall debt and getting them to pay off some of those credit card balances and other things like that. So those are the things that I'm faced with right now. It's the same old things we talk about all the time: reduce your debt, keep your income steady, and then be very careful about researching your option into mortgage, different types of mortgage products and down payment assistance programs.
Wow, you're a wealth of information. Thank you so much, Katie. And also those stories of your clients that you're working with are really encouraging despite all of the, kind of downer type of news we hear these days. So that's good to hear about the silver lining. Let me ask Holly a question here. So Holly, first of all, you are in the mortgage servicing team at Freddie Mac. So please tell us a few things and kind of try to help us out with this mortgage industry jargon. What does it mean to even work with a servicer? And I know that forbearance is a term that's being thrown out there these days as an option for homeowners who are looking for some relief or assistance during the pandemic. But please tell us about forbearance and just what are the options available to homeowners during COVID-19 or even other sort of crises or life challenges.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Maheen. So to start at the very beginning, servicer is who you send your mortgage payment to. So even though Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae may own your mortgage, you're writing a check to Wells Fargo or Chase or Citi or whoever it may be. That's your servicer, the person you send or the company you send your check to once a month. Forbearance is a term that we've heard a lot about lately. And what that is when a borrower's monthly payment is either reduced or suspended for an amount of time that's agreed upon between the servicer and the borrower. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 6 months to start with. If it turns out that the borrower or needs more time, it can be extended to up to a year. And we're going to get into a little more depth about that in just a minute. But one important thing to note is that once the forbearance period is over, you do have to repay all that money that was put into suspense. And again, a little later, I'll talk about all the options for that because it's not a one-stop kind of pay it all back at once. We have a bunch of different ways you can do that. So to continue on, I'll talk a little bit about the CARES Act. And what the CARES Act stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's about $2.2 trillion in economic stimulus that was passed by Congress and signed into law back at the end of March this year. And of course, that was in response to all the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. It touches a lot of different areas of the economy. I'm just going to very briefly tell you about how it impacts the mortgage industry. So some of the things that it does to benefit borrowers who are having trouble paying their mortgage is that under the CARES Act, your servicer must suspend all foreclosure actions, and that includes foreclosure sales and evictions. That term has just been extended through the end of December 2020. So no foreclosure actions can take place before then. You also have a right to have a forbearance for up to 180 days, and then one extension for another 180 days. So a total of a year. you have to contact your servicer, again, the company where you send your payment, in order to request this. In addition, the servicer cannot charge you fees, penalties, or any additional interest beyond what's been already scheduled on your account during this time. And then finally, in order to make the process a little more a little easier for borrowers, I suppose, you don't have to submit any additional documentation to your servicer to qualify for this COVID-19 protection. All you have to do is talk to your servicer and say that you have a financial hardship that's a result of the pandemic. So moving on, we have at Freddie Mac several different things that we've put into place in order to help borrowers who have been impacted by COVID. The first one is forbearance. And like I said earlier, that is either when your mortgage payment is suspended entirely or reduced for a number of months. These options are available to borrowers who are affected directly by COVID or even indirectly. So that means, okay, maybe you got COVID and you're sick and you can't leave the house, you can't do your job, so you can't pay your mortgage. That would be direct effect. Indirect may be that someone in your household is impacted by COVID. Maybe they lost their job. They contribute towards the mortgage. Maybe they're not even on the note. It doesn't matter. If they're helping pay the mortgage and that is impacting your ability to pay the mortgage, then that also qualifies. And we also kind of broadened what kind of property is eligible for this protection. So the property can be owner occupied, it could be a second home, it can even be an investment property. Okay. And also the payment relief is up to 12 months. This is a little different from the way our forbearance normally works. Normally you can have up to 12 months of delinquency. So if you go on forbearance and let's say you're already 3 months delinquent, that means you can only get 9 months of forbearance. With the CARES Act, no matter how delinquent you are when you go into forbearance, you can have up to 12 months of additional forbearance. Again, all the late charges and penalties are suspended while you're in forbearance. And the servicer, once you approach the end of that forbearance period, your servicer is required to try and contact you and discuss what happens afterwards and make a plan with you. So this is not a unilateral decision. This is something that your servicer should be talking to you about and help you come to a decision. So there's several different options for what you can do after the forbearance period is over. The one that gets the most attention, I think, in the media is what we call reinstatement, which is just pay back all the money all at once. Of course, that's not really a realistic option for most people. There's also what's called a repayment plan. So if you could pay a little extra every month, you can add that to your mortgage payment and pay down the amount that was put into forbearance. Then we have some options for people who can make their regular mortgage payment that they were paying before, but maybe not any more than that. So that's called the COVID-19 payment deferral. And what we do is we bring you current, we defer your delinquent principal and interest, and create a forborne balance. And that will become due at when your mortgage becomes mature, if you pay it off, or if you transfer or sell the property. Again, in order to get this particular payment deferral product, you have to have a COVID-19 hardship. The payment deferral can be up to 12 months. Our regular payment deferral is only 2, so that's a big difference. And there's less eligibility requirements. What that means is you have fewer hoops to jump through with the servicer in order to get this benefit. And then finally, if for some reason, let's say your hours were reduced at work and you still can't afford your entire mortgage payment that you were paying before the crisis, we have another option that's called the flex modification. And what that does is it reduces your payment by extending your term, capitalizing arrearages, and sometimes also lowering the interest rate. It just depends. But the target is to get you to a 20% payment reduction. And again, you have to have the COVID hardship. And at the time of the National Emergency Declaration, which was March 1st, you must have been current or less than 31 days delinquent. And the reason for that is we want to know that, be assured that your hardship is actually a result of the pandemic. So that is what I have for now. Back to you,
Awesome.
Maheen.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Holly. Couple of questions. We're definitely seeing a question from one of our participants or attendees today. That one is, will interest continue to accrue during forbearance?
So they can't charge you any extra interest, but the interest that would normally have accrued will, yes, continue to accrue.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Holly. Now, the other thing is, how can someone find out if they have a Freddie Mac owned mortgage? Or, like I said, our competitor Fannie Mae is the other government sponsored enterprise. Is there some information you can share there, Holly? And as we do that, Easterseals is going to drop, I think, a link soon in the chat
Oh, okay.
box for you guys to get the resources.
So there's a couple of different ways. You can go to freddiemac.com and fanniemae.com and type in your information, and it'll tell you if either one of those entities owns your mortgage. And then also cfpb.gov. If you go there, they have a link to the Fannie and Freddie web pages where you can get the information. That's the
Awesome.
easiest way.
Thanks, Holly. I'm glad you raised the CFPB. They're such a good resource. It's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a U.S. Government entity, and they have great information on their website. It is updated in English, Spanish, and sometimes in some other languages as well. And we're also going to be dropping some links into the chat. Take a screenshot. This is obviously, you can check this out later as a video on your own time. But definitely, lots of different resources that we're going to be sharing with you all throughout. So please do look those up on your own time. So with that, let's continue on. I am going to get back with Katie here. So Katie, Holly shared a lot of really helpful information, some pretty technical and complex information, actually. We're talking about arrearages and things like that. First of all, can you talk to us about the role a housing counselor can play to help a consumer kind of navigate during these times? Now, for sure, Holly's clearly stated that it's really important for the borrower, the homeowner, to contact their servicer, the company that they pay their mortgage to. But talk to us a little bit about how a housing counselor can help. And also, if you don't have a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, right, a government sponsored enterprise owned loan, what are some options for you? Are you seeing any clients in such circumstances right now, Katie?
Right. I'm starting to, and it is a little disturbing. I'm afraid we're going into some difficult days up ahead. What I've seen is really starting back in April. I started seeing applicants come in with some subsidies. They're receiving subsidy. It was kind of the tip of the iceberg, and then I started seeing some with unemployment payments. So it's kind of building. And why I say this is disturbing is it kind of gives these families a false sense of income. It's all temporary. We have to acknowledge that fact. This is not going to go on forever. And there's always repayment plans at the end. So I think the main, very essential service that a housing counselor can do is to sit down and do a very realistic budget, that it does not include a subsidy that they're receiving that might go away, or deferral that might go away, but try to get a real good snapshot of, in the next couple of years, of what your household income is going to look like. Because I don't care how much subsidy they get or how much forbearance, you're going to have to reduce expenses, because sooner or later, what do they say? You have to pay the piper. It's going to come due. Some part, some thereof is going to come due. So the families that I talked about today, the ones that closed, those 26 families, what about 6 or 7 of them had been receiving a subsidy, and what they did with the subsidy made the difference. They took that subsidy, they reduced their overall household spending, and they paid down on some of their credit card balances. So it wasn't like the more subsidy they got, the more spending they did. And honestly, in today's virtual world where everything, you don't see the money, it's all credit card and virtual and all of that. It's very, very important to sit down and look at your budget. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of old school here, but when I say budget, you really need to look we used to teach needs and wants. I don't think anybody talks about that anymore, but I hate to bring it up. But when you look at a budget, you have to really look at what do you absolutely need to spend on? And obviously it's going to be food, shelter, utilities, those kinds of things. And what do you just want? So along with all these wonderful government subsidies and products that are coming out, and I completely approve of all of them because they give you a breathing space to kind of pause and not get so behind. But that means at the same time, you really need to bear down and look at that budget and start planning for real life scenario, which is going to happen after next year.
Thanks, Katie. That's definitely some practical advice. I know that you've been in this industry for a while and have seen kind of what works and what doesn't work. So thank you for sharing that. And Holly, I want to ask you another question. So, there are some misconceptions and kind of myths out there. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you're hearing about these days that you think homeowners need to be aware of?
So I think the biggest one that we've been hearing, and we haven't heard it so much recently, but the biggest one is that if you get forbearance, you're going to have to pay it all back right away. And that simply is not true. Your servicer is required to work with you and required to help find a way for you to pay the money back eventually, and also get you payment assistance if you continue to need it.
Hmm. Great. Thanks, Holly. And just one more time, just so we can be really clear, is forbearance the same thing as forgiveness?
No, it is not. So I do know that in the media sometimes those words are used interchangeably. There is such a thing as loan forgiveness. Unfortunately, I guess it's pretty rare. We don't have anything that would count as mortgage forgiveness or payment forgiveness, but that would mean that you would never have to pay it back. It would be forgiven
Mhm.
and gone and forgotten.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Holly. So, a couple more questions. So, Katie, I'm going to bounce right back to you. So, I know you work with renters as well, and are there any tips you can give renters? I've been hearing that renters are pretty hard hit during this pandemic, actually, in addition to homeowners. So, one, can you give some guidance for renters and what their options may be? And then, two, can you talk to us a little bit about protecting your credit during the pandemic, and also, are there any scams going on these days?
Right. And renters have been particularly hit. Um, there are in different municipalities in different areas some moratoriums on evictions for renters, and that has helped. And that's geographically located right now in our area. We have a moratorium on evictions, but there again, it's temporary and it's going to come due. The problem with renters is that it's not generally a fixed rate like a mortgage and rent. And interesting enough, even in the pandemics, I have seen rent payments go up in our area. There again, it's very different in different areas. Um, I, my best counsel for renters is there again to come in and kind of analyze, do they need this apartment at this rate? I have had so many families that'll come in and they're paying now $1,600 a month. For us in this area, that's a lot. For different geographic areas, maybe not so much. But almost always when we talk about it and talk about their options, where do they need to really be close to, whether it's school or if it's faith-based or medical facilities or whatever, just by moving apartment, if you can save $200 a month, it is amazing what that does to your budget. So there again, it gets back to what you need and what you want. When you talk about scams, there is unbelievable a number of scams that are starting up, and I'm afraid as we head into the holidays, we're going to see even more. And the website that you mentioned, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and I think you have you have a website for them, but they have a lot of information of all the new innovative scams that are going out there. As Easterseals, we service a lot of people with disability, And because of that, they're on fixed income. They might be receiving SSI or SSDI, whatever. And those people are particularly vulnerable because now the newest scams are coming in. You'll have a call saying, I'm a representative from the Social Security Agency. I need to verify your Social Security number to verify payment. Nobody from the Social Security Agency will call you. And that was the number one tip from all of these websites is do not answer. Well, first of all, don't answer the phone, period, if you don't recognize their number, and then never give out your Social Security number over the phone. I do want to say this about credit cards. When we're counseling how to reduce the debt and they've built up too much debt on their credit cards, you can write to the credit bureaus or to your creditors and ask for a reduced payment schedule. There is a special letter you can put together. You can describe your circumstance. Obviously, we're in a time period now that we're hard hit by many sides. You can tell them you've worked out a budget and you would like to create a new payment plan and reduce the payments on that credit card. And that has helped some of my clients. Usually you can get it reduced for about 6 months. Obviously, you have a payment plan, so that debt is not going to be completely forgiven. It's not going to go away, but at least it gives you some breathing space to kind of get your act together and get your income on a regular basis. So I would counsel, especially renters, they have a particular time with their credit card debt, is to go to that option, and at least it'll give them some time to get their expenses in order.
Great. That's great, Katie. Thank you. I was just pulling up a site here. Again, you guys check out the links that we're dropping during the virtual event today. My Home by Freddie Mac is a website free to consumers. It's got information on housing, whether it's rental, home buying, home ownership, and some of the topics we're talking about, how to get help, as well as, what if you have been a victim of a scam. So to Katie's point, again, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, lots of information there, including about scams. And they do have a page that's also dedicated to information about credit protection during coronavirus. And again, remember the CARES Act. Under the CARES Act, you do have rights. But one thing about credit is I learned this through the Freddie Mac Credit Smart program, which is a financial capability, financial education curriculum, is even though we have rights as consumers, right, that protect us in different ways, it is really also on us to monitor what's going on with our credit. So in general, whether it's during the pandemic or outside, one of the great resources is annualcreditreport.com. It's the only federally authorized place where you can pull your credit report once a year from all three major credit reporting agencies or credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And during the pandemic, I was just on their website the other day, they're actually offering that free credit report more frequently than once a year. It's normally once every 12 months, no matter what time of the year you do it. And that's one way. It's not going to give you your credit score, but you're going to get to see what's in there because it's pretty common to find errors in your credit report. And then again, working with a financial counselor or housing counselor can be really helpful. So like we were talking about earlier, how do you even find a housing counselor? So again, there's a link. One good way to look one up in your area is by going to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website and looking up a housing counseling agency that's HUD approved. Another thing is Freddie Mac on our My Home site that I mentioned, which is myhome.freddiemac.com. You can also access the Borrower Help Centers and Network, which is essentially we have partnerships with various HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. And if, of course, during the pandemic, everyone is really providing services virtually or telephonically. And then there is a Borrower Help Network that is In Charge Debt Solutions is the name of the company, and they're available for anybody around the country. So you can contact them as one such resource. There are others as well. And for example, they do debt management plans, credit counseling, financial counseling, and housing counseling. So I think the key takeaway here is there are definitely reliable resources out there, including the HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. And then I will also mention National Foundation for Credit Counseling. So if you're looking for a credit counseling agency, again, you're concerned about, Katie talked about debt being a big concern for a lot of people, debt and credit. Again, if you want to look one up that is reliable, check out the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, their website, and then you can find an agency through them as well. So just various options. The good news is that there are resources available. And sometimes people will just go for a credit repair company that is really kind of a for-profit entity that might be offering quick fixes to your credit. If it sounds too good to be true, it pretty much is too good to be true. So the good news is that you can rebuild your credit, but it does take some work and some time, and you really don't need to be paying some exorbitant amount of money to rebuild your credit. So we definitely encourage you guys to check those resources out. Now with that, we have a question from one of our participants today. So let's see here. How bad can an eviction affect the credit score? Are there any solutions to pause a current court order? Katie, do you have any insight on that?
I do not. I have not seen that in my world here. But I would say that you'd need to get a lawyer, a real estate lawyer, to help you with this. And during the COVID times, I would think that there would be some workout solutions.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I can
Thanks,
add
Katie.
a little
Yeah,
to that
Holly.
if you'd like. Yeah, so I live in Washington, D.C., and I know that here that we have a court that is especially set up for renters, and I assume that other large cities have something like that as well, where you can go and say, this is what's happening, and they will get someone to help you.
Okay, that's good. So I think, again, takeaway here is to look up your local resources. Again, I keep mentioning them only because they have many different specific pages for different topics, but the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau does have a page specifically for renters during the pandemic. So again, go ahead and peruse and find resources, and then look up your local resources too. So thank you guys for answering that question. And then I'm just going to encourage everybody, if you have more questions, please go ahead and ask them. And in the meantime, I'm going to throw out one more resource for you. And this is getting back to what Katie was talking about, which I'm encouraged to hear how many loans you have helped close, Katie, despite or during the pandemic, people are still buying homes. Interest rates are low, so in some family situations, they're able to get in. One resource that's free, and it's a robust, trusted online homeownership education curriculum or course, is called Credit Smart Homebuyer U, and it was created and launched by Freddie Mac this past January. And if you just go to FreddieMac.com/CreditSmart/HomeBuyerU, just like the letter U, like university, that is available. You can check it out, and you can register with any email address, take it on your own time. It's mobile friendly and it's self-paced. And so one thing you could do is you could kind of DIY, right? So you can kind of use these resources, myhome.freddiemac.com, Credit Smart Home Buyer U, and you can get the education. And that is really, it can help you, for example, work on your credit and work on your budget, like everyone's talking about. And the good news is you would potentially be able to qualify for a loan product, for a mortgage that would give you better terms and a better interest rate if you're able to do that financial work to prepare. So that's really one of the benefits of doing homeownership education and financial education. But the other thing I would recommend is combining that, right? So you're kind of like, I took the course, now what? You want that one-on-one help and you want to work on an action plan. That's where a housing counselor like Katie comes in. So definitely feel free to combine that do-it-yourself education with working with a housing counselor one-on-one, because they can really work on that action plan with you. So we've said quite a lot, and I just want to take another few seconds in case we get any more questions here. But with that, we're going to, I think, give one more opportunity for Katie and for Holly to make some closing comments. And I'm going to pause right here because I think we did just get a question. So let me check it out. So here's a question saying that certain consumers have expressed interest in leveraging the equity on their homes to temporarily increase cash flow using a refinance. What are your recommendations regarding this as a strategy? So let me actually go to both of you. So Holly, would you like to take this or pass this question to Katie?
Well, I'll just say that that's definitely an option for someone if you're not behind on your mortgage. It's something you could do. But as far as the actual advice on whether or not to do that, I'm going to pass the ball to Katie.
Well, obviously there's not just one answer for this, but I did actually have a client who went through this process. I had been working with him for about 6 months, and he was just over his head with debt. We really couldn't manage that. We looked into forbearance and all those other kinds of options. And he had been in his house long enough to build up enough equity, and he had good enough credit. So he was able to get probably the best cash flow situation by going to a refi. He was also disabled, so he could take a disability exemption on his property tax. And it worked out to his benefit to go that option. That is not for everybody. Each case is very, very unique. Refis carry settlement costs, just like any mortgage purchase. So you have to be aware of all of the costs. But if you build up pretty good equity in your house, you have good credit, you have your expenses in line and your budget well set, it can be a very viable option.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. That's helpful. And so, giving it a few more seconds here to see if there are any burning questions. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Katie to make any kind of closing comments, anything you really want our audience today to walk away with.
Well, obviously, I have to make my final plug for down payment assistance. This is my passion. I see it work all the time. It works for people extremely low income. And you talked about education, your courses. That is a requirement for any down payment assistance programs. And there are so many out there. It changes all the time. I know across Texas, there's over 40 different programs. In different municipalities, they have their different programs. They all carry different guidelines. It can be for people with very low income up to people who have income of around 100,000. You would be amazed. So I really do have to make that final plug. And for people that think they cannot afford a house, you really need to start with, I think, a good housing counselor, and taking one of the home buyer classes is a good start to kind of get your feet wet and see what is involved. And if it's right for you, it's right. It's not right for everybody. I won't say that. But I have put people in houses with as low as 23,000 gross annual, and they are in a fixed rate house for the rest of their life. They're not going to be bumped out of their house because the rent goes up. And for a lot of people, this is just such a great blessing. So that's my plug. I totally believe in it. Whatever area you're in, do your research, find out what your options. You can combine down payment programs with the correct mortgage product, and it makes a world of difference in your life.
Thanks, Katie. And I think I have to make a plug here now, piggybacking off of what you said. You just mentioned down payment. Isn't it true that a lot of people think you need at least 20% down in order to get into a mortgage? Can you tell us what it really is like?
Well, now your own product, the Home Possible, is only 3% down. And if you have down payment, it covers all of the down payment and all of the closing costs. I've had most of my clients bring no cash to closing. They probably spend $500 to $1,000 out of their own pocket. These are people that have worked hard all their life, had great income and all of that, but have never had a chance to build up that amount of money that people think that they need to get into the house with. If you have your credit, if you keep your credit in line and your debt low, you do not need, what is it? Some people think 20%, 30%. Actually, in my father's day, it was what, 35%? I don't know, but we're not there. And we're very blessed with great mortgage products out there with very reasonable low down payment products.
Awesome, Katie. Thank you. So that is one of the frequent misconceptions out there that we hear about. So we wanted to kind of dispel that. And then transitioning over back to Holly, do you have any closing comments? Anything you want our viewers to walk out with today?
So I think the overarching message is that there's help available. And I would add to that, it's important to talk to your servicer. The servicer does, in fact, want to help you. They want to help you stay in your home, and they have tools to do that. And then I can just make a little plug for the hashtag that we see behind Maheen's head every time she speaks, which is hashtag help starts here. And it's a really cool interactive tool where you can step through and depending on your circumstance, it'll walk you through the whole process of getting help with your mortgage.
Awesome, Holly. Thank you. Absolutely. Hashtag help starts here. It is interactive. I think, this is kind of an overwhelming time for a lot of people. So just to be able to break it down and be like step by step, what are the different options I have? Again, you guys check out the opportunities you have to work with HUD-approved housing counselors. Can't say enough about education counseling and organizations like Easterseals. I would suggest, if you can, please share this video later on with your family and friends. And we thank you so much for joining today and for your good questions. And with that,